country where I am is not so good.
Okay, all right.
Okay, sorry about that. So you see, amplitude is the volume, is what you refer to as volume. All right. So this the first representation of frequency up here is the low frequency. It has fewer cycles per second. Now the second one is the mid frequency. It has more than the other one, and then you see the high frequency. It has higher, number of cycles per second. I came to show us a graphic representation of the difference between high frequency to low frequency. So this is what frequency is the number of cycles per second, and is usually measured in hertz. Hertz is pronounced Hertz, and is represented with capital H and small z, as you can see in the slide I'm showing you now. All right. The relationship between frequency and pitch is that the higher the frequency, the higher the pitch. The lower the frequency, the lower the pitch. For example, as I talk now, I have reduced the high frequencies in my voice. Now you can hear more of the low. If I now change my voice and say, I don't know how to get a very high pitch voice right now. My voice is stressed. I would have given you a high pitch voice. So the lower the pitch, the lower the frequency, the lower the pitch. The higher the frequency, the higher the pitch. And ear, the human ear can hear from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. That 20 kilohertz is 20,000 hertz. All right. So let's move quickly from that. I'm trying to compress a lot into this one class because we do not have so much time. Now, this is what I'm showing you now, frequency ranges. I believe we can see frequency ranges on the screen now. What frequency ranges, the importance of frequency ranges is that if you can understand frequency ranges, it will be easy for you to balance your sound. Remember, in our definition of poor audio quality, we said an imbalanced sound is poor audio. Imbalanced sound. Sometimes you come to a live stream and it sounds so funny, and it's because there's too much high on the mix. Sometimes because there's too much low on the mix. I believe we have one more class. In that class, I'm going to play audio samples for us and show us how to mix with a digital audio workstation before sending it to your live stream. So in that class, I'm going to play samples of imbalanced mix, distorted mix, low volume, and all of these things we are doing. That class is going to be the practical class. All right. So our director is going to inform us on when we're going to have that class. So so that you can see this clearly. Number one is bass. That's low frequency. It's low frequency. From 20 hertz to 250 hertz is the low frequency. All right. If you are writing, you can write down. It will help you, trust me. From 20 hertz to 250 hertz is low frequency. That is the frequency you find mostly in the bass guitar, and kick drum. If you want your bass guitar to have more presence, you will boost between 20 hertz and 250 hertz for the low ends on your bass guitar. And usually the speakers that produce that sound is the subwoofer. The subwoofer, different brands of subwoofers have different frequency response. When we get to frequency response, I'll explain that. Different speakers have different frequency response. Typically, a good subwoofer will produce these low frequencies from 20 hertz to 250 hertz without stress. Okay, that is what will give you the low end, the depth, the heavy sound in the kick drum and the bass guitar, and sometimes the floor tom. For me, I like to boost these frequencies on the floor tom to get that depth from floor tom when the drums are mic'd. Now, the second frequency band we are looking at is low mid. The low mid is the frequency after the low, It's not mid, but it's not low. It's in between. It's a mixture of mid and low. It's from 250 hertz to 500 hertz. This frequency now, this low mid, is usually the frequency that makes the toms on your drum pronounce. The toms on the drums, it gives them, you know, that it gives them that feel, like they can feel the space. All right, 250 hertz to 500 hertz. From 500 hertz to 2 kilohertz is mid. This mid is usually what makes the voice fat in a sound. If you boost 20 hertz to 250 hertz or 250 hertz to 500 hertz in a vocal, you'll be in a voice, you'll be hearing too much pops, like when the preacher says, "Praise the Lord," the P and the B's will be disturbing. You just hear boop, 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 and pop, 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 pop everywhere in the sound. So usually we'll cut, we'll cut from 20 hertz to around 200, 300 hertz from the microphone so that you don't have those pops. But you will still need the 500 hertz, and for the microphone to have weight, for the voice to have weight and not be too heavy. So the next thing we're looking at, and it also gives life to the guitar, acoustic guitar, lead guitar, electric guitar has its presence in this range. Okay, so we have high mid. High mid is the brightness of the vocals. You want to hear the sound, the S and the T's clearly. The high mid frequency will give you that. You want to hear brightness, but not the too much highs. This guy will give you some presence. It makes the vocals to come out in a mix. An imbalanced mix doesn't have the vocals coming out. There's a place for everything in a mix. When you are talking about equalization, there's place for everything in a mix. If we are mixing and they are singing during a worship session in a church service, the lead singer's microphone is supposed to be the loudest thing you hear. After the lead singer's microphone, the next thing you have to hear is the backup mics. That's the background vocalist. After the background vocalist, you are supposed to now hear, if you have a lead guitar, you're supposed to hear the lead guitar and then the drums, and then the keyboard is to fill the space, and the bass guitar is to give the foundation in that order. So you have that, the place of all this, and this adjustment of these frequencies and balancing these frequencies is what gives those positions, is what gives the positioning, right? If you don't cut the right frequencies in a particular instrument, it will be fighting with another instrument. For example, if there's plenty of lows in the vocal, and then there's no high mid from the 2 kilohertz to 4 kilohertz. If you drop 2 kilohertz to 4 kilohertz in the vocal, you will not hear the vocals stand out in the mix because it will be fighting with the keyboard. I'm sure somebody's understanding what I'm saying. It will be fighting with the keyboard. So once you boost that, it will leave the keyboard and come forward. When you cut the lows, it will leave the keyboard alone to sound its best. All right. Then we have the high frequency, which is also known as treble, from 4 kilohertz to 20 kilohertz, which is the highest. 20 kilohertz, the highest frequency the human ear can perceive. The dog that we have can hear above 20 kilohertz. The dog can hear above 20 kilohertz, and a whale can hear below 20 hertz. That's why they say the whales hear by vibrations. Usually that frequency is only felt. You can't hear it. If maybe a heavy truck is passing on the road and there's vibration, is the frequencies below 20 hertz that cause that vibration. We can relate with it, but we can't hear it. Okay. So that's an additional, right, an addendum to what I'm explaining on division of frequencies. So when you understand frequency ranges, is easy to get. All right. The next thing we're going to look at is frequency response. Um, frequency response is the behavior of an equipment, how an equipment behaves when it's given certain frequencies, when you present it with certain frequencies. That is why it is important that when you want to acquire an equipment, you want to buy an equipment, you check what is the frequency response of this equipment, and what do I want to use it for? What am I using these speakers for? What do I want to achieve with it? Is this speaker for, do I want it to be the kind of speaker that can give me a clear mix? There are speakers that no matter what you mix, you will not get the best from your mix. I've used many of such speakers because of their frequency response. Okay. So you check the frequency response, sound pressure level. These are two key things to check, and the power rating before you buy a speaker. Frequency response. You check frequency response. You check sound pressure level, and you check what was the other thing I said again? Frequency response, sound pressure level,
Power rating,
and
sir.
power rating. Thank you very much. Thank you. You check power rating, sound frequency response, and sound pressure level before you buy a speaker. Because you can buy a speaker that looks very big. You are mixing and mixing, and you're not getting the best from it. In your monitor, for example, I mix with an in-ear monitor. That is the monitoring device I have gotten used to over the years. If I mix without it, I may have issues. So if you don't have good speakers, mixing with the in-ear monitors, in-ear monitor I use is the X2 Pro. That's what I use. And if you are mixing with that, you can hear exactly what you are mixing. Everything stands out clearly in the ear. You can hear out any, the mix is connect, send that mix to a speaker that doesn't have good frequency response, or the frequency response is biased to a certain frequency, you will not hear the sound come out like that. So frequency response, behavior, what the equipment, how the equipment responds to the frequencies that you send to it. All right. So a flat frequency response means that every frequency is reproduced equally. You see, there equal reproduction across frequencies, accurate sound representation. So any frequency, how you send the sound the sound. If you are sending low frequencies, the speaker gives you low frequencies. If you are sending more highs in your mix, the speaker gives you that. That's what a flat response does. All right, an equipment, a speaker that has flat response. Now, a colored response. Depending on what you want, you may need a colored response equipment for certain purposes. For example, stage monitor. The stage monitor, you should use a speaker that responds lightly to high frequencies, because there are many microphones around there. Microphone signals are between the high, mid, and high frequencies. So you don't want a speaker that is too shouty, so that when you mix, the color of the speaker, the color of your EQ is warm, so that you don't have too much feedback. And what feedback is noise in sound. Is one of the things we defined earlier as poor audio quality. Feedback. When you have feedback, the microphone talking to the speaker talking back into the microphone, and it creates a loop. And then you hear the whoo, whoo, all those annoying sounds that can come up, during a service. All right. So if you have a speaker with colored response, it emphasizes some frequencies and reduces some frequencies. All right. This creates distinctive sound character. So depending on what you want, you may want to go for a colored frequency. That's why I said an understanding of frequencies or the principles of frequency and amplitude will help you to get the best from what you have. So somebody may want to go back now and check your speaker to check the model. You just type the model and check the frequency response for that speaker so that you will know what to send to it and how to use it. You can also check the sound pressure level SPL so that you know what to send to it. You can also check the power rating so that you know what amplifier can run it safely and smoothly over a period of time without issues. All right. So we're looking at frequency related terms, frequency range, span of frequency a device can reproduce. Then EQ. EQ is short form for equalizer or equalization. Equalization, what we have here on the slide is the equalizer, all right, the EQ. You can see the logo, the icon of the EQ there. That icon is showing you adjustments, adjustment knobs for frequencies. Even on your smartphone and your devices, you have all these audio players have these equalizers on them. The equalizer helps you to adjust frequency. It's a tool you use to adjust specific frequencies to either repair a sound or to balance the mix. Okay. So EQ representing equalizer rather is a tool you use, while EQ as equalization is the process of adjusting. I'm sorry, I did not include that in this slide. It was an oversight. Is the process of adjusting frequencies to get the best from the audio. I'll take that again. Equalization is the process of adjusting frequencies to get the best from an audio signal. In other words, to get a balanced mix. Balanced mix. Difference between one mix engineer and the other is their ability and the depth of understanding of equalization. Many times, equalization is like something you can't play with in audio, managing audio. Equalization. I think we can move to the next. Okay, let's come back to equalization. Let's finish up with equalization.
Let's go inside.
Now, your EQ is what determines, if your sound, in terms of frequencies, is going to be pleasant to the ear or hurtful to the ear. There are certain frequencies that, when boosted on certain equipment, can cause pain to the ears of the listeners. Have you heard somebody talking with a microphone and it's painful, pained you to the ear? That's because the frequencies that cause pain in that microphone have been boosted. All right. So too much high mid in a microphone, in a voice, can cause pain. Somewhere I showed us, look at this. Where is that? The mid frequency is the frequency that the human ear is most sensitive to. I think I captured that somewhere in this document. All right, let's go on. If it's ahead, we'll get there. So, yes, equalization is very important. And for many years, I battled with, equalization because I did not understand frequency. I just gave myself to a course. I took a course on understanding frequencies. And that course has changed my life forever. So I used to avoid equalizers when I see equalizer. If you have a graphic equalizer in your church, you bear witness to the fact that the first time you saw it or the first time you had to handle it, you were just so, will I say, perplexed, because there are so many small knobs, small knobs, and the problem is where to push this, where to push that, and some people will just give it a smiley face because they saw somebody's graphic equalizer look like that, and then they will now come and set your own like that. Meanwhile, they are not using the same speakers, you are not using the same microphones, you are not using the same hall. Your equipments are not the same, your hall is not the same. The person using the microphone in that church is not the same person using the microphone here. So you cannot just set your graphic equalizer to what you saw somewhere. You have to understand frequencies to be able to do that. That's why I'm taking a lot of time, on frequencies. At this point, I would like to pause and ask if we understand and if we have been following to this point. I think somebody should respond so I'll know, and then we move on.
Yes, I have been understanding and enjoying it fully,
Okay, sir.
sir. It's just that I've not been seeing the what do I
The
call
screen.
okay, the when you keep quiet,
Yeah.
that's when the screen will come up. Once you start talking, it will be your picture that I will be
Oh.
seeing. And now that you keep quiet, I can see it. Immediately you start talking, it's your picture that will come up.
Wow.
But at least I enjoyed the teaching so well because there are some things I have been seeing, and I really don't know much about them. You really expand, and the more you are expanding, the more happy I am.
Okay. Thank you very much for that feedback. I am encouraged. And now I know that my class is understanding what I'm teaching. To buy microphones that have, the color is warm, less highs, a little more of the mid.
So I don't know if you are talking, no, I can't hear anything.
From source and make it not to be distorted. If the signal coming from the equipment is already distorted, you will struggle with that audio. I have done a lot of live recordings for people, and we have had to struggle with, low budget live recordings. When you request for specific equipment and they say, "Oh, our budget cannot handle that. Can we manage what we have?" At the end of the day, I'll end up replacing half of what I captured because The audio from the equipments were bad. Sometimes backup microphones, background vocals, like a recent project I did this month, early this month, on the 6th, I think 6th was a Sunday, 6th of this month, I did a live recording for somebody here in my city, and I had to, last week Monday, record all the background vocalists again because of the microphones they were using. The microphone from source has distortion. So we can manage, to use compression and use equalizers to adjust the frequencies so that it's not so bad. Use reverb, make it, just surround sound so that people in the hall can hear. But for a live recording, for a project that you are going to put out for people to listen to, some people will use headphones to listen. They are listening up close. That distortion will show. There's no way you can run away from it. So the equipment you are using to capture the sound into your mixer before processing is very important. Please, you want to buy equipment and you have not understood, equipment specifications to the point where you are sure that you can buy a microphone that sounds good or a keyboard that produces good sound, bass guitar, and all of that. Please consult a professional in that field so that you don't buy what you cannot use, or you spend money to buy things and then feel frustrated and you're not getting the results that you desire. All right. All right. So let's move on now to the next very important concept in audio engineering that we must understand, which is amplitude. So I'm going to keep quiet for a while so that the brother who can only see my screen when I'm not talking will see this slide I've projected now. All right, so I'll be quiet for a while. Okay, so I believe that was enough time for you, sir, to see the screen. Amplitude is the measure of sound wave strength. All right, that's what it is. Think of amplitude as volume. Think of it as volume. When you hear amplitude, just think of it as the volume level. Amplitude is from the word amplify. Okay, the verb to amplify is to make something louder. Okay, to amplify. That's what your amplifier does. It takes the signal you have sent to it, then pushes it, gives it a strength that converts it to a power frequency that can now be produced by the speakers. So this is what amplitude is. It's a measure of sound wave strength. The strength of the sound wave is what determines how loud it's going to be. And by beside you see an image of a strong wave. And I'm using my phone for this class. So the next class, I intend to use my system. There are a number of configurations I need to do to use that. I have images and designs of more representations of waveforms, distorted wave, quiet wave, and all of that I can show you. But I'll do that in the next class. Okay, please bear with me. So amplitude is a measure of sound wave strength. The stronger the wave, the louder the sound. Okay, and how is it perceived? It's experienced as volume or loudness. That is how amplitude is perceived. It's perceived as volume or loudness. And amplitude is measured in decibels. Decibels is a unit for measurement of amplitude. Decibel. Decibels is represented with small d, capital B. If you look at your mixer, for example, your mixer will have this dB on the channel strip. Depending on the mixer you're using, but I know most mixers have a dB. Then you will now see they will now begin to write minus this, minus this. You see 0 dB. You okay from minus this to up to 5. Then you see 0. Then you see 5 on top again. Then you see 10, and it goes like that. Now, this is measurement of the volume levels, decibels, the strength of the sound wave that you are receiving and sending out. So on your mixer fader, you will see there's number. It's from minus this to plus that. Okay. And then when you have 0 is the unity 0. When your mixer fader is on 0, what am I even saying? I'm now talking about mixing. Please permit me to stop what I'm saying now and do it in the next practical class where I can show you a mixer surface. Okay, please. Movement of faders and all of that is when I'm teaching you about mixing and balancing sound. But amplitude is measurement of sound wave strength. Where you measure is the measure of sound wave strength, and it's measured in decibels. So the more the dB, if you say I'm pushing this to 10 dB, that's a lot, or minus 6 dB, that's the level of increment, or I'm bringing it down, reducing the volume and all of that. Okay, in amplitude components now. Peak amplitude. Amplitude is not at a healthy level. It's still to clip. Right? So the maximum signal level is what is peak amplitude. So usually I like my signal to peak, at a level where it's not hitting red. That is to say, if this person handling this microphone now shouts very loud suddenly, it should peak at this level. It shouldn't cross here. And that is what you set that from your gain, from the gain structure, right? That's what is called gain staging in sound. If you remember earlier in the previous class, the last slide of the previous class is what carries that, is what carries that gain structure. Gain structure is part of what we are going to look at. That's in the practice. It's using amplitude is the highest signal level, the maximum. This is the highest that this level is getting to. Okay, and then average amplitude is typical operation level. That's the average level of the signal having a 2-hour service. The of amplitude that you have over a period of time. Say for a church service, you have music. For certain services, you have music and prayer most of the time. Average level. This is very helpful because when you understand your average level, it will help you when you are using your compressor to know how to keep the voice to the point where the signal is dangerous for your equipment listening. So it's important for you to know the average amplitude and know how to keep it at that average. All right. So dynamic range is a common term in amplitude. And it is also why we need compressors. All right. Your compressor is to give you a good dynamic range. And what is dynamic range? Is the difference between the quietest and the loudest signal. Difference between quietest and loudest. Difference between when the sound is quiet and when it's loud. That distance. So you will notice that I'm talking and stopping at some points because I got feedback from somebody that our my screen comes up when I'm quiet. So I want him, or if that's the case for any other person, I want those people to be able to see the slides within intervals. So dynamic range is the difference between the quietest and the loudest in your mix. So sometimes you are listening to a live stream or you are following a live stream and everything is loud, the sound is loud, everything is okay, normal volume, everything is fine. And then once the music stops or the prayer stops and somebody is talking, you are struggling to hear. The difference between when it's very, the difference between the quietest and the loudest should not be so much. But sadly, that's the case in many mixes when you are following live streams online. And that can also discourage people. Just now we're hearing loud sound and then now it's so what we used to do in the early times of my engagement in sound and audio engineering, mixing live sound, managing live sound, and managing live stream audios. And Mr. Chukuma can remember this very well when we first met. This dynamic range adjustment, we're doing it manually. So when music comes up, we reduce the volume so that the maximum signal level is still healthy for listeners and for the equipment, and we don't have distortion. So there was one small device. This one small device he came with. This was where we met for the first time. I was mixing as a mix engineer, and he was handling the live stream. Balancing the setting up the video, the audio, and then pushing it out for the stream. So I was excited about the fact that it was one of the few people who knew what to do with the audio I was sending to him, which was clean, sending to him to send out. Because sometimes you send clean audio from technical and the media guys send it out and it's terrible. The distortion is bad and everything is crazy. So I was excited about the fact that he knew what to do with the audio I was sending him, and he was excited about the fact that this guy is giving me good signal. That was how we met, and then we got talking and we got close, and today we are here. So we used to use that knob on that small device to increase and reduce. So once it's music or prayer and everything is loud, we reduce the volume so that it doesn't clip, it doesn't hit that red meter. I'll teach about meters and all of that. These things I'm saying I'll talk about. They are simple things that as I'm showing you, you just understand because you have interacted with your own devices, your mixers, and all the softwares that we use. And again, I mentioned that the software we're going to use for the digital audio workstation we're going to use for recording, editing audio, and mixing the audio that you send to OBS for your live stream is Reaper. I had said that I think he inquired from me for that, got that information. I believe that the update was given on the groups. So if you don't have Reaper installed already, please, you can go to reaper.fm to download it. Reaper it's a light, it's not so heavy. The files are not heavy, doesn't consume too much space, and it helps you organize your files very easily. It has a wide range of features. That's why I prefer Reaper. Reaper doesn't lag easily, except your system is so terrible. Before Reaper begins to lag. Okay, so Reaper. From Reaper, you can wire your mix from Reaper to OBS for your live stream. so that your live stream has a dedicated mix. We are going to look at that. So this dynamic range that we were adjusting with our hands is what we can do now with compression. You set the compressor to set a threshold for your loudest sound, to block it from going louder than this level. Let's say, for example, minus 20 dB. You block it from going beyond minus 20 dB, and then increase the low part. Now, when you are increasing the volume, you are increasing the overall volume. But what happens now is that in increasing the overall volume, the high volume is not going too high, it's not going beyond minus 20 dB because we have set the threshold. This is what the compressor does for us. All right. I'm going to talk about compressor in that class I'm talking about. We have hardware compressors, we have software compressors. If you are using a digital mixer, you have your compressor on the digital mixer for each channel. If you are not using a digital mixer, there are some analog mixers that have a single knob compressor on them. And then there's also the external compressor hardware, which is some are 2 channels, some 1 channel, 4 channel, different number of channels. If you have that device, then you can use it to get a good dynamic range for your audio. The loudest part is not too far away from the quietest part of your audio. So now, amplitude and distortion. If you look at this image here carefully, the wave signal you have up here, you see that this up and down, those, you see the line up and down. That top is the allowance, the headroom that you have, the space you have for your wave to pass. If you are using a digital interface, you can see and monitor those. If you are using a digital audio workstation, you can see and monitor those. Okay, so you can see the wave, how heavy this wave is. Because of how heavy this wave is, we have the warning sign here already that your wave is now too much. Oh, your wave, see, the wave is too high. So you can now bring it down a little, reduce the volume and all of that. So this is a wave representation. Normal signal is clean waveform. When your waveform is clean, it means your signal is normal. When from this point now, where the wave is now very heavy, it's too heavy, it's approaching limits, your compressor now begins to act if you set a compressor on it. All right. Then at this point, see this other wave where it's just straight like this. Many times I've gone to churches to do sound and I'm asking them, let me see, the media guys, the audio they are sending out. I'm asking them, let me see your recording. And the wave looks like this. And when I tell them this audio cannot be clean, some of them argue, they argue with me. But I've done this thing long enough to know that this wave you are seeing here cannot be clean. To be hurtful, that's what distortion is. So when you exceed that limit, clipping occurs. And after that, you have severe distortion where all you hear is noise. You won't hear a word from severe distortion. So you see, you have normal signal, it's clean, it's okay. Then when it now begins to approach limits, that's why in sound there's something called headroom. The space you leave between the wave and the roof of your signal, the peak, that's the limit. You don't let it get to the highest level. You give some space. If this is how far the volume can go, you will not take it that far. You give it some space, headroom, so that your sound does not hit the peak and begin to clip. So your compressor helps you, to balance that. But once it exceeds that, there's nothing your compressor can do anymore. It begins to clip. That's where the meters start hitting red. I'll show you the meters on the mixer and on the digital audio workstation when we are doing, that our last class. Once it gets to severe distortion, it's noise all over. And that severe distortion is what chases people away from live stream because it's hurtful to the ears, it's disturbing, and nobody wants to endure that. So you just hear people, media help us with the sound, media help us with the sound is not clear. When they are complaining, media help us with sound is not clear. Is in many cases is distortion. It's distortion, severe distortion. They can't hear anything. It's just noise. All right. So amplitude and frequency. Low frequencies need more power to perceive. All right. Your low frequencies, you have to amplify them before you can hear them. At a low amplitude, you feel the low frequencies more than you hear them. In the case of the subwoofer, many years ago, I think 2017, I went to volunteer and of course, I have a lot of experience from volunteering. That's something I recommend. Please volunteer a lot when there are crusades, events in your area, crusades, and they are bringing in more sophisticated equipment than what you have in your church. Please go and volunteer so that you can also learn from there. This is something I should say at the end of the class, but I'm chipping it in now because of this experience I want to share with us. I was volunteering at a crusade. I went there to volunteer to assist, to pick wires and all of that, do whatever they asked me to do. I didn't know that the guys who were setting up the sound were not so good with it. So I just got there and they said, okay, wait. I was waiting. They were setting up everything. At the end of the day, the sound came up and it was bad. So the person controlling everything for the crusade asked me if I can mix. I said yes. So I touched the sound and it got better. So I told them we will come in the morning and reset this sound so that we can have better audio. The connections were wrong. Signal parts were not okay. The patching was bad. So the director of the crusade now came and met me and said he went for a Reinhard Bonnke crusade in Lagos, and the sub was just massaging his chest. The sound was soft and sweet. But when he comes here, they want to give him heart attack with the subwoofer. Is there anything I can do about that? I said, I'll do my best. This was 2017. And then I mixed the sound. And when he heard the sub, I heard the kick. The man just came, hugged me, left, entered his car, drove off, came back with a bag of rice, a pack with rice, croaker fish, and drinks for myself and the guys I went with to do that work. All right. So, yes, low frequencies are not supposed to be so troubling. They are not supposed to get to the point where somebody cannot stay. My wife and I attended an event, and my wife told me, please, let's go home. My chest is paining me. Why was that? Because the punch on the sub was too much. Low frequencies should be felt very soft. Okay, that's what brings the balance to your mix. When the low frequency is not harsh. So low frequency needs more power to perceive with the ear, but you are already feeling it in your body before you perceive it, before you hear it in your ear. So you manage the power that you are giving the low frequencies so that your mix is balanced. Mid frequencies, yes, this is what I was talking about. The mid frequencies are the most sensitive frequencies to the human ear. Human ear hears more mid frequencies than it does any other frequency. So yes, that's why as we talk, we hear each other because our voices contain more of mid frequencies and a little high frequencies. Okay, so the third part about amplitude and frequency is the fact that high frequencies carry less energy but more details. Now, if you take out high frequencies from a voice, the sound becomes very funny. If you just take out the tweeter, the high compression drivers that produce the high frequencies in the speaker, which is what we call tweeter, if you take it out, the sound becomes muddy, sounds muffled, like you are holding somebody's Yeah, as if you are holding somebody's nose and pressing their mouth and they are struggling to talk. That's how the sound becomes. High frequencies carry less energy, but it's more details. It carries more of the details of your sound than the other frequencies. Um, all right, so this is, let me summarize this here. This is a summary of what we have done. All right, frequency basics. Cycles per second determines the pitch of your frequency. Now, the amplitude concept is signal strength affects the volume. Now, this is a charge that I'm giving you. Practical application of what we have looked at, frequencies and amplitude, is when you balance both of them, you have clear audio in your church. Once you can balance frequencies and the amplitude. Oh, I forgot to tell us. Sometimes the frequency, you are balanced, but you have not balanced the amplitude. The sound is not balanced. Now, let me explain. You have mixed the individually. If you are soloing an instrument and mixing one particular instrument, for example, Tom 1, and we tell the, when we are mixing, you tell the drummer, Tom 1 is playing Tom 1, and you mix it, and Tom 1 sounds clean, the frequencies are okay, the volume level is okay. And then you go to Tom 2, and it's playing the Tom 2. This is during sound check, right? When we are mixing and doing sound check. Tom 2, he plays Tom 2. Tom 2 sounds, the frequencies are okay. Everything is fat, it's balanced, and then the volume is okay. You go to floor tom. When you are done checking everything individually, you check everything together and then balance the amplitude between them. That's the balance the levels between them. You say, okay, this tom one volume sounded okay, but it's higher than the snare, it's higher than this, it's on top of this, it's higher than this volumes. So the balance between your frequency and the amplitude is what gives you a balanced mix as far as sound is concerned. A balance between right frequency balancing and right amplitude balancing is what gives you a balanced mix. So by the time we go into the practical class where I am showing you, a mix, and I'll actually take a multi-track session I recorded and then mix it for you to hear if time permits us. And I trust God that we'll be able to do that in that class. All right. At this point, we have come to the end of this particular module, but the part 2 of optimizing audio for live stream and church services. And what I have covered is the fundamental of audio engineering, understanding frequency and understanding amplitude. A balanced frequency, a mix with balanced frequencies and balanced amplitude is what gives you a balanced mix on your church, in your church service and on your live stream. And what this does is that it gives, the attendees in your church a better experience and those following online a better experience. When we do that class, we'll now touch mixing for live stream as being different from mixing for the live hall, because in the hall there are walls that are affecting the sound, human beings in the place, acoustic materials, diffusion materials, reflection materials, and all of that. Then the congregation that affects what you are hearing in the live room. All of those things are not present on the live stream. So how to mix to get that to your live stream and give the listener online that feeling of being part of, going to look at it in that class. Thank you. If there's any question, please, I'd like to hear your question. Any question, any comment, any.
Thanks.
Okay, so no comment.